Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hockey Hub. Glad you could join us. I'm Adam Pellerin with Judd Sirott and Andy Brickley, just home from a long road trip. Unfortunately, in more ways than one, as the Bruins lose all 5 games out west, closing things out with a loss to the Red Wings on national TV Saturday night. It's episode number 51, gentlemen, which means this could be a Matt Poitras episode. It could be a Ryan Spooner episode. Not many guys have worn number 51 in Bruins history, but it's good to be back with both of you. Again, I had to reintroduce myself because I've been away from the team for a little while you guys had traveled, so it's good to catch up with you two. How are you guys?
Good. It's good to see you again. Didn't recognize you. I had to ask you if you still do the Bruins.
Yeah, I do. I'll be with you guys for the stretch run the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, not really a stretch.
I'd be a lot better if we came home from this 5-game road trip with something to show for it in terms of the Bruins and their points. You come back, it's raining out, it's not quite golf weather yet, courses aren't open. I mean, the depression continues.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. I was able to get a couple of rounds in, Brick. You would have been proud. Rainy, cold conditions, but I went out there, I stuck it out. And,
Look at you.
Got the job done and didn't get the job done well.
Tell me you didn't wear a toque out there.
No,
Okay,
no.
all right,
That's
good.
a Barry Peterson move right there. He wears the toque.
He has an assortment of lids that he wears that are a little questionable.
Did you get in the birdie pool?
I didn't get in the birdie pool, no, unfortunately. You know, it's early. It's early. Well, in terms of the Bruins, by the way, I should tease what we have coming up on the show. Kasey Hudson and Natalie Noury will look ahead to the Frozen Four. One Hockey East team still standing. That would be Boston University. They'll look ahead to that. We'll also have a one-on-one with Zdeno Chara coming up. Sophia Jurksztowicz will have that. But first, let's just get to the road trip. Bruins lose all 5 games. Obviously, that didn't go well, the results that you alluded to, Brick. But I guess, Brick, we'll start with you. Overall takeaway from the road trip in terms of what you saw on the ice.
Yeah, this Bruins team, as it's currently constructed, and the teardown, I'll call it that, at the trade deadline, the people you moved out, not only quality people, but very good hockey players. You know, it's just a dose of reality. You go into Vegas, you go into L.A., you don't expect to get results. I certainly didn't. I thought those would be the 2 hardest games to take anything from, you know, when we got on the plane to leave for Vegas, when you're trying to imagine what the trip's going to look like. And I thought the winnable games were the most disappointing to me. You know, you look at this Bruins team, and you're at that point in the season where reality suggests, you know, even though you're still mathematically in the playoff race, you're not really in it. Too many teams to climb over, and you're too far back, and your roster is such that it's hard to win games. The takeaways are, you know, they have like a pop gun offense, or a pop gun offense. They just don't have enough. You know, you have to keep that Zacha, Geeky, Pasternak line together to give yourself a chance, yet at the same time, you're trying to find out things about players that you acquired. And we'll use Casey Mittelstadt as an example. Who can he play with? Can he play with a scoring right winger like David Pasternak? And those are the things you start to experiment with and take a look at it, and you evaluate the players that you've brought in the deals that you've made. You've called guys up from the minors to see, you know, at this point in the year, can they sustain? Can they play? Can they play 7, 8, 9 games in a row at the NHL level? Are they ready for that? So that analysis is going on all the while you're losing hockey games. Now, I think a fan base might say, yeah, please continue to lose. Be competitive and continue to lose because that'll improve your draft position. And I can't argue with that. But as players and as coaches and as an organization, it's all about wins and losses. You know, development's important and culture's important, leadership's important. That allows you to win hockey games. And it's about wins and losses. And they hate it. They hate losing. Nothing worse than losing when you play at the NHL level. And I think that's the problem with or the feeling that you get after being on the road for 12 days and you don't come home with a point.
I think there's another name that we should probably also bring up, and that's Fabian Lysell, who was brought up just before that road trip. He didn't play in the first game of that road trip against Vegas and then played in the subsequent 4. So what was he going to be like? This was his first concerted look at National Hockey League games as a guy who's 22 years old. Plus, you're going on the road. The one game that he played at home, and again, this was late December. It was on home ice against the Columbus Blue Jackets. So now you've got a completely different situation, as Brick alluded to, against some really good teams that you were going to face, and some teams either like L.A., in the playoff structure, or even a team like Detroit, who is just outside the playoff structure that's trying to break his way in. So what does he look like in some of those instances? Is he able to break through? He's still looking for his first National Hockey League point. He did create a few chances, but I think one of the things in talking to the coaching staff is that they need him to be on the interior of the ice more often, that maybe some of the plays he's making, they're just too far away from the ice. They're on the perimeter. If he's going to be effective, he has to get closer to the net. We're going to have more of an opportunity maybe to see him here down the stretch as he gets his first concerted look. And I want to add one more because Brick also alluded to some of the evaluation that's going on. And I think about a guy like Mason Lohrei. So this is his first full season in the National Hockey League. He played 41 games last year. He played 21 in Providence last season. It's different, I think, for a lot of these guys, and Brick can allude to this. What is it like for you playing the first full season, going through that full grind in the National Hockey League, and we get an opportunity to get a fuller picture on a guy like Mason Lohrei?
Well, it varies from organization to organization, Judd. Team to team. How is the team constructed? How competitive are they? What kind of leadership do they have in order to take a young guy and teach him what's most important? And this is what you need to, incorporate into your game to be a quality NHL player. You obviously have the skills. You have the offensive skills. You got creativity when you have the puck or you're in the offensive zone, and that's the fun zone to play in. And he has that. He has that innately, and I think he continues to get better the more reps he gets in offensive situations. But it's that learning curve without the puck and how you defend and how firm you defend. And we've talked about that all year long. You hope that given the situation on the back end with the Bruins, with the absences of top guys, and now you're playing up in the lineup, you're getting hotter matchups, you're getting more minutes, but you're getting more opportunity and you're getting more experience and you're learning on the job. That's all the good news. But you don't want to keep seeing the same mistakes. And I don't think you'd see that if the Bruins had what they've had for the better part of the last 2 decades, and that's a strong room and a strong voice coming from the players. I played for coaches that would say, Brick, I need you to tell your centerman to do this. And I would say, why don't you tell him? He goes, well, it sounds better coming from a teammate and a respected teammate and a guy that knows the game. And I'm not sure the Bruins right now have enough of that for a kid like Mason Lohrei. I want to go back to Fabian Lysell too, Judd, seeing that you brought him up. And for a young guy with expectations that everybody has put on him because of his draft position and the success of a guy like David Pastrnak, drafted in a similar spot, and both supposed to be, offensive weapons. And you saw what David Pastrnak was like when he was 18. And there's a distinct difference between the two, but I'm just making the comparison. You think about the opportunities that you mentioned that he had in this stretch of games on this road trip. If he buries one of those opportunities, it's a different mindset for the kid. It's a different mindset for the player. All of a sudden, that doubt that might be there that you belong. When you try to make plays that work in the American League that don't work up here, it's depressing and it hurts your confidence, and you wonder about your ability. And am I just an American League? Am I a 4A player? What am I when those plays aren't working? I can't beat people to the outside. But when he gets his opportunities to finish, and he didn't finish, he had the breakaway in Detroit. He buries that there. Maybe you start to see a different player. I can't guarantee that. I just know from my own personal experience, the minute you make a play that is successful at the NHL level in your first go-round, it really impacts how you feel about yourself and your believability that you can play at this level.
Yeah, I would think as a young player, obviously you want to trust the process, but it's probably a lot easier to do if you're a veteran player, right? Because you've been there, you've done that, you trust the process, and it's end up bearing fruit and results, right? But for a younger player, you probably want to see the results a little bit earlier just to get that sort of confidence break, right?
Yeah, it's who you are. You've been that offensive player at every level, and you believe you're an NHL player. You feel like you've proven yourself at the American Hockey League. Give me an opportunity. Don't call me up and play me 2 games and play me on the 4th line. Put me in an offensive situation. Put me with an offensive sentiment. Put me on a power play, 1 or 2. Give me that opportunity. That's the strength of my game. And then when you do get the opportunity, if you don't finish, that doubt starts to creep in, and that do I belong feeling starts to creep in, and that's so detrimental to a young player.
In terms of some of the other storylines on the road trip, quickly before we get to some other things, Morgan Geekie scored 4 of the 7 goals the Bruins scored in totality on the road trip. Casey Mittelstadt, David Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm, the other goal scorers for the Bruins. But in terms of Geekie's game, I mean, we've been talking about It's either Morgan Geekie, David Pastrnak, or Pavel Zacha to some degree in terms of creating offense and that line sticking together. But Morgan Geekie, since January 1st, 19 goals, which is, I believe, tied for 9th now as we record this podcast in the National Hockey League. One less than Alex Ovechkin, who we will talk about, by the way, coming up, who's coming to TD Garden tonight. But in terms of Geekie, obviously a strong candidate for the 7th Player Award. 27 goals now on the year. That has been a bright spot for the Bruins, guys.
Well, I think Judd would agree with me. It's a lock for a 7th Player Award.
Yeah, I would agree too. I didn't want to discount any of the other candidates, but
no, that's a lock. You know, I just love the growth in his game. He's bigger than you think. He's stronger than you think. He's actually a little faster than you think because of the way he carries himself on the ice. You don't look at him and say, "Wow, he's quick, he's fast." He has those long, powerful strides. He's got a good stick. He's got a good reach. But what I like is the way he sees the game offensively, how he gets in position to be shot ready, and that's the reason he's scoring goals because he's got a bullet of a shot and it's accurate. I wish guys would hit the net as frequently as he does when he gets his opportunities. But his ability to open up when he's supposed to open up, his ability to lose his check with some misdirection, and his willingness to play between the dots. We talked about the inside position for a guy like Fabian Lysell. He should watch Morgan Geekie and try to learn from him. He gets inside the dots and he's shot ready, and I don't want him overpassing. He can make plays, but he's a finisher. That's his game. And that's what he's doing this year, the second half of this year. I think he had some hard lessons early in the season. Thought he could just show up and it was just going to happen. You got to put in the work. You got to pay attention to details. There was a lot swirling around that Bruins team, which was a bad environment at the beginning of the year, and it showed in the results. It got a guy fired. But as far as Morgan Geekie goes, I love the way he is adding more and more to his arsenal, the way he sees the game offensively and his ability to finish.
Well, one of the things that he's talked about is just how much he's had a chance to learn from a guy like David Pastrnak. And I think to Brick's point, so how do you find yourself some of those quiet spaces? How do you find yourself some of that open ice? And how do you learn to play in addition with a guy like David Pastrnak? And he has started to add that to his game. I don't think that that's something that we necessarily saw him do last year. And granted, he wasn't necessarily playing with David Pastrnak. He did have some opportunities, and most of the time if he was playing with Pasta, he was playing as a centerman last year in a fill-in role for the Bruins. But the other thing that sticks out to me, and this comes off the heels of the conversation we're having with Fabian Lysell. Now, obviously, these are two very different guys in their National Hockey League career. Fabian just turned 22. Morgan is 26 years old. But I think that there's a mental fortitude in there that exists because he has that maturity. This was a guy, as Brick mentioned early in the season, he was benched. He was a healthy scratch under Jim Montgomery early in the season. There was still a belief, however, in his abilities. But he had to work it back by having a good practice, having a good next game, building on that, and then rising to the level that we've seen him rise to at this point. I think the other thing that's important to note, since we're talking about his road trip, because he only played intermittently with Zacha and Pastrnak. Actually, I should take that back. He was always with Zacha. It wasn't always with Pastrnak. But he was still able to produce, and he was still able to be a threat even when he wasn't playing with David Pastrnak. And I think that should stand out.
I think when you see or listen to his interviews, Adam, there's an intelligence there, and not just a hockey IQ, but I'll apply it to the sport of hockey when I say, the development of him offensively. He'll understand if a team's playing man-on-man and how do I get my separation when I don't have the puck. He'll understand because he's paying attention. He watches the way a team defends in their own zone. Do they have switches? Do they release? Will a forward stay with me until I get to a certain point on the ice? Will a defenseman stay with me until I get maybe beyond the dots and I'm moving away from the net? And he finds those quiet areas, the soft areas. He finds the seams. That's what I'm saying about his offensive growth to his game. And when you're shot ready and you get to those seams and you play with playmakers like a Zacha, like a Pastrnak, you're going to get your opportunities. And I think that's what we've watched the second half of the year.
Yeah,
and the other point I'd like to make...
Sorry, Brett, go ahead.
Yeah, the other part I'd like to make about his intelligence is, like I said, it was a tough beginning of the season for him with the healthy scratches, as Judd said. But he recognized opportunity. The Bruins did not really have a top six. Their preference was to have Charlie Coyle be your third-line center if you had the depth at the offense, at the forward position. So there was room inside the top six for a guy that had a pretty good year last year, kind of a breakout year as far as scoring goals. And he saw that opportunity, and even though he didn't grasp it initially, he certainly grasped it right around the halfway point.
Yeah, and I think growth is the word that you used, and I think we've seen the maturation of Morgan Geekie in Boston, right? I mean, this is still a young player we're talking about, and setting career highs last year in terms of offensive production, not only matching that, but surpassing that, and that's something that we didn't think was going to happen at all, to your point. A healthy scratch earlier in the year under Jim Montgomery, and then picking things up really in December. I know we talk a lot about January 1st, but if you take a look at some of the games with Morgan Geekie, those numbers start to sort of climb in the month of December.
Yeah, and certainly not putting the cart before the horse, Adam. Just thinking ahead to next year, that'll be a whole new pressure for him.
Sure.
That's a whole new pressure. And we saw it with some players this year. Can you handle the pressure of expectation based on performance from the year before?
Yeah, and actually that was leading me to my next point. There's a fortitude there with Geekie as well. And I remember talking to him earlier in the year, and Judd, you may remember this as well. I had a sit-down interview with him, and one of the things that I had seen from an earlier interview is that he reads everything. He's aware of what people are talking about, and he wants to do that because it sort of motivates him, and you don't hear that from players. Usually from players you hear, I really don't pay attention to it. Not to say that they don't hear it, because they have friends and family who are monitoring all the social channels, and it gets back to them. And in terms of how they handle it, that's the question. Well, Geekie admits he reads everything, he listens to everything, and he uses that as motivation on the ice. And so that pressure you're talking about that he will face next year after having a career year, well, I guess his approach may be setting him up for success in that way too.
He's got Sisu. You know what Sisu is?
No, what's Sisu?
That's Finnish for fortitude.
Oh, there you go.
Just to add one more point about Morgan Geekie when it comes to, I didn't think we'd be talking Finnish here. I
had to show off my heritage.
I got to really brush up.
Might be the only Finnish word I know.
The Corpusalo conversation
except
coming
for some
up next.
vulgarity, because I certainly heard that growing up.
But with a guy like Geekie, since you referenced that he reads everything, the other thing in having a conversation with him about that is last year in the playoffs, he basically turned all that off. I think it got to be too much. I think the other thing is a lot of the stuff that he may read, I think it's the way he digests it. He may read something by a particular writer about somebody else in the team, and he's smart enough to realize, I don't think that's accurate. I don't agree with this point. So if this writer is not right about this aspect of the team or this aspect of this player, how right could he be on me or she be on me? So I think he comes at it with a very healthy perspective when it comes to reading some of this stuff. But I think he does it a lot also because it's entertaining for him.
Did you call out our guy, Steve Conroy? Oh, my God. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Steve.
Don't let
Just
him near
kidding.
the jukebox.
All right. Stream the entire Sox season with a NESN 360 annual plan, available at an all-new reduced price of just $20 a month, paid annually for a limited time. Get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit NESN360.com to sign up today. Number 8's coming to town, gentlemen. Tonight at the Garden, Alex Ovechkin, 890 goals, scored again against the Sabres. He's now 4 shy of tying the great one, Wayne Gretzky, 5 away from setting the all-time record in goals scored in the National Hockey League. We're not going to talk about the overall leader in terms of the World Hockey Association and that National Hockey League combined. That would be Gordie Howe, by the way. Maybe he'll break that, too, at some point. You never know. But in terms of Ovechkin, and I guess we'll start with the career of Alex Ovechkin. Brick, what stands out to you about his ability to score goals, his overall game, just the player himself?
Yeah, the two things that come to mind immediately is his ability to score goals and the variety of ways he does it, and the other is his availability. He's missed very little time in terms of missing games due to injury. There were times where he refused to go to the All-Star game and he got suspended,
Right.
if memory serves me correct. But yeah, just the way he plays the game, as physically as he plays the game, and how he gets between the dots and to the front of the net, and the body contact that he absorbs and that he initiates to avoid injury. as often or as consistently as he did, to allow him to be on the ice and play his game. I think that's the amazing thing to me. Saw a lot of that in Ray Bork when he was in, when I had a chance to play with Raymond in Boston. Just, everybody dump it in Ray's corner was always the belief of the opponent, and then be physical with him and wear him down. Well, Ray didn't wear down, and his ability to recover after each and every shift and get right back out there. It was just his capacity, his engine was just phenomenal. And I say the same thing about Ovechkin. His ability to play his style of game and to be able to play it every now. And how fast did he come back from a broken leg this year? That's
absolute
incredible.
Bull. Yeah.
But no, it's hard to score goals in the National Hockey League. I think it's even harder today, even with coming out of the lockout and the rules changes where everything opened up and the removal of the red line in terms of two-line passing and It opened the game up, the less interference, the less pick and rolls, the less holdups, grabs, hooks, however you want to call it. It opened up the game to be more offensive. But the goaltending is stellar these days. These guys are huge. The equipment's big. Sometimes if the goaltender's out on his angle, you can't even see the net behind him, yet this guy continues to score. It was a record I thought that would never be broken, and I was a fan of Wayne Gretzky, and I thought it was a record that, I love the fact that he scored 894 goals, but if you took them all away, he's still the points leader in the history of the National Hockey League. Yeah. You got to have respect for that. That's incredible, the amount of production he put up. But I didn't think it was a record that was going to be caught. I didn't think Ovechkin would get there, and I am thoroughly, thoroughly impressed and have great respect for the guy because he's going to break it. He's going to break it this year.
I think all those things. It's the ability. It's that thirst to score goals, and other than this season, and there have been very few. I think to Brick's point, that he's been incredibly durable, and he's just such a force on the ice. He's huge. he's a big man. I think he's listed at, and again, these are not always accurate, but he's listed at 6'3", about 240 pounds. And this was a guy who, early in his career, he was dealing out some serious punishment. The one guy that pops into my head early in his career before he started to get concussed and get hurt was a guy like Eric Lindros, who was dealing out that kind of punishment and scoring at that rate. Ovechkin and Lindros, two very different players, but I think that's what stands out. And I thought it was also interesting just hearing some of his coaches talk in some recent articles, whether that's Peter Laviolette or Barry Trotz or going back to Glenn Hanlon, his ability to adjust. He's been around for so long. So he's been in the league. What is this? This is his 20th year in the National Hockey League. And obviously, as Brick touched on, the game has changed, and he's changed with it.
Yeah, he's evolved. No question about that. All of the great ones do, right? Including Sidney Crosby, by the way. 20 straight years, averaging a point per game.
Yeah, and Crosby got criticized for not being a goal scorer. And what did he do? He came back the next year and made sure he scored 50, just to make a point.
Yeah.
And I put Ovechkin in that same class when it came to, he can't win in the playoffs. He's not a leader. He's not one of these guys. He takes shortcuts. All he wants to do is score goals. He doesn't have players rally behind him. He doesn't have a cohesive group because of the way he played. That was all nonsense to him, and he proved it when they won their cup. He made sure that was not going to be a narrative. When you talked about his career.
Man, winning a cup in Vegas, huh? Man!
Well, he had an epic celebration that whole year. Yeah. The Caps celebrating the cup, I don't think anybody celebrated harder than a guy like Alexander Ovechkin.
Oh, man. I was looking at some of the numbers, too, just in terms of, the Caps have 9 games left, and Brick, you had said that he's going to do it this year. He's 5 away from breaking it. By the way, he's got 4 4-goal games in his career, so if you're looking at Tuesday as a possible historic night, it's happened before. It hasn't happened against the Bruins. He does have a hat trick in his career against the Bruins, but he's had some pretty good numbers against these teams, to say the least, as you might expect. He's got a couple of games left against the Hurricanes. He's got 51 goals in 91 career games. He's got 44 career goals against the Islanders. A couple of games left, obviously teams that are in his division, and the Blue Jackets got a couple of games left there as well. So, the numbers have been there historically. for Alex Ovechkin against these teams, so we'll see how it plays out. Now, in terms of longevity, well, somebody who can certainly speak to that is Zdeno Chara, who played into his 40s. Alex Ovechkin turns 40 in September, but Chara not only played against Alex Ovechkin, but he was teammates with him for one season in Washington, and Sophia Jurksztowicz caught up with Big Z to talk about that.
With Zdeno Chara, obviously former captain of the Boston Bruins, but also teammate of Alex Ovechkin, who we want to talk about today, as he's going to be facing the Boston Bruins on Tuesday. I want to start with just his overall aura or vibe or leadership, since you were such a leader in the Boston Bruins room and then you left to join another captain. What was he like as a captain in terms of the culture he established in the room?
Yeah, he's a great captain. He's leading by example, and obviously everybody knows he's an amazing player and such a great goal scorer. But he's a really favorite, likable guy in the locker room, and everybody respects him. And he's just leading by example.
Now, when you joined the Washington Capitals, did he want to include you in that leadership role as well, considering your history?
Well, I think it was just pretty natural for both of us to be understanding that my role would be somewhat in a leadership group, but it was his team, and the core group was very strong as far as leadership goes, and so I was just very happy to be joining them.
When you were playing with him, he passed Phil Esposito, obviously also a former Bruin, at 700 goals. Do you remember that celebration, or what was it a big deal made with him or in the room afterwards? And did you ever think he'd be approaching Gretzky?
I think everybody knew it was just a matter of time. He'll be getting really close to Wayne Gretzky. I think now it's pretty obvious he's going to be passing Wayne, which is incredible and pretty amazing, and just a matter of time when.
Exactly. Now, defending him. Everyone knows he can score from different positions, obviously, but everyone knows his one position from the circle, yet he still somehow manages to get it, even though people are expecting him to shoot from there, expecting people to pass to him. Can you just talk about his hockey IQ and what it was like defending him and how he manages to get open somehow?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that he just keeps scoring from, obviously, one of those spots on top of the circle and power play, but that just shows you everybody knows it's coming, and everybody's trying to defend it, and it still finds a way to score. That's pretty amazing, and only the greatest players were able to do that, and he's obviously one of them.
Was it fun defending him? I know that there's a quote from 2012, so you probably don't remember saying it because it was a long time ago, but it was in a postseason with Alex Ovechkin, and you were saying that you relished those moments, defending some of the best players in the world. Did you enjoy facing him as an opponent?
Yes, absolutely. It was always physical. It was always challenging, but I embraced that challenge and love going against, the top players. So absolutely.
Last one, Alex Ovechkin is going to be 40 as he enters his new contract, the last year of his contract next year. You obviously didn't hang them up until 45. Did you notice how he was, this was a few years ago now, but training differently? Has he reached out to you for advice, or what advice would you give him to keep his body, strong and going for many years to come if he wants to?
Yeah, definitely it's adjustment. But I think he's making this adjustment really well. You can tell that he's not maybe as quick as he was, but he's playing the game with his experience and his smarts, and still finds a way to score and be very effective. So good for him.
Zdeno, thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophia. By the way, I mentioned Kasey Hudson. We will hear from she and Natalie Noury coming up as we get ready for the Frozen Four. Boston University, the lone Hockey East team remaining after BC and UConn both lost on Sunday. Heartbreaker for UConn, too, in overtime, falling to Penn State. So we're gearing up for Alex Ovechkin coming to the Garden for the final time this season, and possibly for the final time not being the all-time leader in goals in National Hockey League history, which, by the way, before we get to the next topic of discussion, do we think he's going to get to 1,000 goals?
Why not? Why not? I don't know what his game plan is, Judd. He might have talked about maybe next year being his last year, particularly if he didn't reach 895 this year. You know he's coming back for that. But does he want to play beyond 40, 41, 42? Because if he does, that's within reach for him. I mean, that's how talented. He's playing with such a youthfulness right now. When you take a look at this Washington team, it's not Backstrom and Oshie anymore. He's playing with different players. He's playing with young guys that are excited about playing in the NHL, that are playing quality hockey. They're good down the middle. They're a good rush team. And I attribute that to a quality head coach and a coaching staff that has these guys playing in a style, and they can play any style, not the way you want, that they will dictate. What's the best way for us to play tonight to be the Boston Bruins? And they'll play to that style. And it's a variety of style. They don't play the one way all the time. But I think because of the success of some of the younger players that have popped, that have been drafted and developed or traded for as young players that are now quality NHL players, I think it's added to that youthfulness to a 39-year-old guy that has a lot to play for.
So he only has one more year left on a contract. He's signed through 25-26, making $9.5 million, which right now that sounds like a bargain. And the Capitals are only going to get better. They're going to add Ryan Leonard here down the stretch. It's just a function of when he opts to turn pro. And this is already a really good Capitals team. We'll talk about this a little bit more during the course of the game, but their general manager, Brian McClellan, has started to sign his guys. He wrapped up his goaltenders. So both of those guys are going to be back, and he started to ink some more guys looking forward. And you've got a lot of key guys that are under contract at very manageable numbers here going forward. So why not? Let's see how far he can get. But just thinking about Ovechkin's numbers and where he ultimately winds up, is there somebody currently in the game that has an opportunity that could pass him? The one name that really comes to mind, just based on the frequency and the amount that he scored, is Austin Matthews. So if you look at goals per game scored, he's 5th all-time in the league. Ovechkin is 8th. So if he's able to stay healthy and continue to produce at this rate, and if he's able to play have the type of longevity that a guy like Alexander Ovechkin has had, he has an opportunity to break it. And if you're wondering, David Pastrnak is 18th on the list.
I think health is the key word with Austin Matthews, right? And two different players in terms of the way they're built, Brick, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And that was the first thing or second thing we talked about Ovechkin and why he's in the position that he's in. One other thing I would add, too, that helps Ovechkin at this point in his career is you don't just game plan for him, right? I mean, Tom Wilson has 31 goals. Protas has 30 goals. You just can't say, we shut down Ovechkin, we win the hockey game. Not the case. If it was ever the case in the past, that no longer exists.
So Alex Ovechkin sitting on 890 goals going into the matchup against the Boston Bruins. Again, he has a hat trick in his career against the Bruins, but needs a huge night at TD Garden to tie, never mind break the record. We haven't had a 5-goal game in a while either in the National Hockey League. So it leads to the next question.
Didn't Gretz have, Judd, you probably know this, you're a historian. Didn't he have 45 goals going into the 39th game and score 5 to score 50 and 39?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. I do remember it was against the Philadelphia Flyers, if memory.
I think you're right. And I think the last one was an empty netter, I believe.
And the highlight that I remember is the Flyers wearing the Cooperalls.
I wore those. Yes.
Loved Snazzy. Them. What's the Finnish word for that?
I love it.
God, right. I looked like I was in shape wearing those things.
So Judd alluded to it earlier in terms of looking at somebody who could possibly, potentially, maybe break the record someday. And Austin Matthews, looking at goals per game, it leads me to ask this question: who are the greatest goal scorers in the history of the National Hockey League? Sure, you could look at the list and say, all right, yeah, there's Gretzky, there's Ovechkin, there's Jagr, there's Howe, right? But, there probably goes beyond that. And, Brick, you would have a much better handle on that because you played with some pretty unbelievable goal scorers in your career. So if you were to give a top 5, Brick,
Yeah, well, I mean, just from my generation alone, I mean, you go Gretzky, obviously Lemieux, Brett Hull. Those 3 right there, right off the top, for me, did I love the flash of a Ricky Middleton? Absolutely. Guys that scored goals that were very memorable because of the individual talent that they had. But for me, and I grew up in the area of, the big bad Bruins, I was a kid. I was very, I was affected, and I loved watching guys score goals. So Esposito was right there, as was John Busick. Those were my guys as far as goal scoring in the NHL, when I was 8 to 14 years old. But for me, and I played against this guy, and I played in the same division, so I saw him frequently, it was Mike Bossy. I thought he was the most gifted, natural goal scorer. And I don't know where he is, Judd, on that list of yours of goals per game or
number one.
All right,
number one. 573 goals in 752 games.
Yeah, Adam, he would be my number one pick.
Yeah,
as far as pure goal scorer.
And right behind him, I think the other name that would come to mind, because I love that list, Brick, is Mario Lemieux. And this was a guy who was severely hampered. You want to talk about injuries.
Yeah.
He didn't play 1,000 games. He played just over 900 games. He had 690 goals. He had some serious back problems.
Cancer.
Yes. But I remember guys telling the story because of the back problems. They would have to actually tie his skates because he couldn't bend down to do it. And then he would still go out and play, score a couple.
Come on, we got a half a dozen of those guys on the alumni team.
I can't believe you talk about Reggie Lemelin like that.
Johnny Carter was my first pick.
Oh, okay. The other name, if you're just looking at all-time goal scorers, and if you want to include, obviously the Bruins like Phil Esposito, Cam Neely comes to mind.
Of course.
Cam with 395 goals, and he played 726 games. Pavel Bure.
Yeah.
This was a guy who played just over 700 games, but he had 437 goals. He was electrifying when he played and when he was right. But he didn't have the type of longevity that some of the other guys that we're talking about. Lemieux played over 200 more games than he did. The other thing that I just kind of looked at on the list, David Pastrnak is 18th. So Cam Neely's 15th on the list, all-time goals per game scored. David Pastrnak is 18th. He's in front of Connor McDavid. He's in front of Leon Draisaitl, which is a pretty impressive number. So of the current guys that are still playing, it's Matthews, Ovechkin, Pastrnak as 1, 2, 3.
And looking at David Pasternak's numbers, and again, since we're talking about Cam Neely, he's only 12 away from Cam Neely. In terms of the all-time goal list in Bruins history.
Yeah, when you were talking about Ovechkin and his physical play, Judd, earlier in the program, yeah, Cam's name is right there along, the way he was dominant physically, especially in the old Garden when it was tight quarters, so it was hit or be hit, and he was the hitter most nights, and to be able to score 50 and 44, that's pretty impressive stuff. But again, availability, right, durability. Unfortunately for Cam, didn't go that way for him. Otherwise, it's amazing where he would have ended up in terms of total goals. But, goal scores, I think about the different teams that I played for. At the end of my career, I was playing with Winnipeg. Teemu Selanne was dynamic. What a goal scorer. He could be in full flight in 2.5 strides, like 2.5 strides, and you couldn't catch the guy. And he was a bigger guy than you realized. But he could shoot the puck. He was a talent. Loved watching him play. Keith Tkachuk was on that team. And, I'm just talking about guys that scored at least 500 goals in their career. I played with Patty Verbeek in New Jersey. You talk about a guy that scored goals. You talk about playing between the dots at his size. It's just incredible. So not only did I get a chance to play with Cam, but I played with those guys as well. When I broke in with Philadelphia, he had Darryl Sittler, in the last years of his career, was part of the Flyers. Timmy Kerr was on that team. I think he still holds the record for most power play goals in one season, to give you an idea of what the damage he could do in front of the net if he had stayed healthy. So, when you play long enough and you play with a number of different teams, obviously I play with Mario down in Pittsburgh as well. So saw some great goal scorers firsthand, played against them, played with them, and it's just amazing to watch them at ice level and their ability to score goals.
Timmy Kerr, 1986, 34 power play goals in 76 games.
That's pretty good.
He was an immovable object in front of the net.
Yeah, Teemu Selanne, by the way, you mentioned him. He and Alex McGillney are the last players to score 70 goals in the National Hockey League.
Both had 76 the same year.
Yeah, and we were talking about that with Austin Matthews, right? Couldn't quite get there. But anyway, yeah. It's a great conversation to have in terms of, Alex Ovechkin, and I wonder, and again, they're never going to combine the stats from the World Hockey Association, just like they don't combine the stats from the NBA and the ABA or the NFL and the old USFL. I think Herschel Walker had 25,000 all-purpose yards between the USFL and
Could you
the
trade
NFL.
him for 6 or 7 guys?
Jim Kelly's numbers were also really good.
Yeah, on the USFL, yeah. A couple of names certainly played in that league, just like the World Hockey Association. But I mentioned Gordie Howe between the two, 975 goals. Wayne Gretzky too.
Hey, I'm going to add up my all my games in the American League and the IHL and add them to my NHL stats. How's that sound?
Excellent. We'll have the banner raising ceremony. We'll schedule that. That'll be a big event here on Nesson. You can catch it on the app too.
Do I get to decide the location of that?
yeah. I think you might. I think I have a couple places you might select. Good conversation, guys. And watching history unfold. Even if it's not, with the Bruins, you can certainly respect this milestone. Just incredible. So we'll look forward to Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals coming to the Garden. Pre-game coverage kicks off at 6 o'clock on Nesson. Just 8 games left for the Bruins. Over the last couple of weeks of the season, 2 weeks from today, final regular season game at home. So the clock is ticking on the season for the Bruins.
I would add one last thing, Adam, if I could, about Ovechkin in the game tonight. The Bruins are short on experience on the back end right now, okay, as defensemen. Mm-hmm. Don't come out and play and get mesmerized and watch Ovechkin play, or otherwise you know what's going to happen. So, the Bruins, they're in a losing streak. They were competitive against Detroit. Build off that competitive spirit. And even though Ovechkin's coming in with all this fanfare and all eyes of the hockey world on him, as players, not on our watch, should be the attitude.
Yep, absolutely.
And the Caps, by the way, because they've essentially got the Eastern Conference all wrapped up. I understand there's a big battle atop the Atlantic Division, but for the most part, the Caps first in the Metro, first in the East, second in the National Hockey League. All of those players in the Washington Capitals are going to be looking to feed Alexander Ovechkin, whether it's at TD Garden or down the stretch, so they can watch him set the record.
You also don't want the President's Trophy either for the Capitals. So, anyway. Bruins have that going for them. All right. Well, again, you got Bruins hockey. You also have Frozen Four, one Hockey East team left standing. That's Boston University. And here to help us with that conversation, we have Kasey Hudson going one-on-one with Natalie Noury.
What's going on, hockey fans? Kasey Hudson back alongside Natalie Noury to do Hockey Hub. I want to call it the college edition. This has been so much fun. I think we need to make sure that this is part of the rotation next year. But Natalie, you and I got a chance to chat last week. We also were able to break down our thoughts on getting this tournament going. We were rallying behind the Hockey East teams that were getting in the tournament. So first and foremost, how have we both done so far? Because we had expectations. We had some sneaky guys in the mix. We were rooting for Maine, and the picking apart has begun to take place as we gear towards the Frozen Four.
You're right. And this has been so much fun. I almost feel like you and I should have done a mock bracket as soon as we started talking about this and just seen where we were, because I'll tell you, there's only probably 2 teams standing that I would have expected in, which maybe other people agree with. But it's been an exciting weekend. I think the network that we have just in hockey over here in New England, everybody has been just so dialed into this tournament. And I feel like this year in particular, it was just the matchups were so intense and so competitive. I got to catch a couple of games from start to finish, but it's just amazing how these teams have really come together this year and just made incredible things happen. I mean, Penn State, you have to credit them. I mean, and Western Michigan too. They're both heading to the Frozen Four for the first time in program history. So this is so exciting for college hockey across the board. You think about recruiting, you think about the future of these teams and these programs. It's an exciting time, although sad. Some teams' seasons come to an end, college careers come to an end. Some players go on and sign pro contracts. But it's an exciting time of year, and we've got some exciting games ahead.
I know. Actually, let's make sure we calendar that in for next year, us doing like a proper mock draft and breaking that down ahead of time, because we were so invested. But you said it. I mean, there was just so much excitement around this year. More importantly, a number of firsts for a number of teams. So we had Boston College taking on Bentley. That game was so much more enticing than I think any of us were prepared for. But it also rose the proper question marks for BC and how far they travel in this particular tournament. So I figured why not start there, because those results are kind of the freshest ones that came in. The next test that BC had was taking on Denver, and while Denver was ranked 6th overall when it came to college hockey, they had enough heading into this matchup to make you wonder if Boston College can rise to the challenge. And you and I have talked about this, George and I have talked about this. We kind of saw some exploitation, one would say, between BC and BU in the Beanpot. BU just did a really good job of turning on the wheels, dialing up things when it came to transitions, but more importantly, just being so commanding in the neutral zone, forcing and capitalizing on mistakes. And I feel like that's what we saw versus Denver. Denver just completely having the ability to own and find space in the middle of the ice. So it made it a tough grab for BC to try to move past it, Denver coming out on top.
Yeah, and we knew that this matchup was one of the more, in my opinion, I actually felt like this is what you were going to see in Manchester, New Hampshire Sunday, Denver, BC rematch of last year. So it was kind of like all of my friends who are BC fans were there. I don't really know how many Denver fans flew in, but this game was just so highly anticipated. And it's really unfortunate for Boston College because, of course, we were rooting for them as the Hockey East school there. But, you're right. The neutral zone was really an area that kind of stuck out to me. Not so much, Boston College. But I think for me, it was like, oh my God, look at the way that Denver moves through the middle of the ice. They're so in sync. They're so telepathic. They're so dominant. They enter the zone. It's clean and they just start firing. And I think that's something that really kind of stuck out to me because I was just like, this team looks like a pro team. They were ranked number 1 coming into this college hockey season. And you had to ask back then, okay, why? Well, they had players like Jack Devine. They had players like Zeev Buium. But the other players that were able to contribute in this game just kind of shows how well-rounded Denver is. The neutral zone was a big area of struggle for BC in the Hockey East Championship when they played Northeastern, I think, in semifinals or quarterfinals. This game, Denver really owned the middle of the ice, and I think that's what kind of helped them. Boston College had a great season, a great run, and disappointed for Greg Brown and his group, but you know what? They gave it their all.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you said telepathic because it's so true. It just felt like they had this unwavering ability to just know where the next player is. Obviously, that speaks to key chemistry. And then also just the fluidity of their defensemen, getting up in the play, being present, also finding and creating that space. So the most complete package. I couldn't agree more with that when it comes to how Denver was able to come out on top to move forward. Denver will get ready to take on Western Michigan on April 10th, and we'll see what goes down there because in my personal opinion, you got to keep a team like Western Michigan off of the power play. That's basically, in my opinion, for the most part, how they were able to kind of overtake UMass. I mean, UMass was very much in that matchup, and then you give up a number of brutal power plays. They find the back of the net, and then they secure their stamp to the Frozen Four. A lot of great goaltending between both of these teams, BC and Denver as well. Matt Davis continuing to just stand on top of it. But we got some good news, at least for BC, out of all of this. And you kind of touched on that. Ryan Leonard's going to go ahead and get the tap up to go to the pros, signs his contract, entry level, of course, with the Capitals. And he's making his debut in Boston versus the Bruins. What do we think about this news?
I think it's so exciting, and I think the Boston Bruins are going to have to set aside 28 tickets because there's no doubt that the BC Eagles will be in attendance for this game. So exciting for Ryan Leonard, and this is something that's been anticipated for such a long time. Of course, last year he said, I want to go back to BC. I want to win a national championship. So looking at things right now, I think, the option for him to go pro and go to the NHL, now's the time. And I'm so excited to see what he does because all year, coaches around the league, all year, media around the league, Ryan Leonard's been the guy. It's like you never run out of storylines about Ryan Leonard, but asking about him over and over again, it's like, well, what more is there to say? He's just outstanding. And he's so skilled. He's so fun to watch. When you're in his presence, it's kind of like you're already dealing with a pro. So really excited for him. And I think it is so cool, so timely that he gets to open things up against the Boston Bruins. I'm excited to see that rookie lap pregame and just kind of see what happens for him.
Oh my gosh, I know. Like, I love when you can add a little bit of poetry to the next step in any guy's career, and what a way to do that. And plus, he's been playing massive games in TD Garden for years, and then this season alone for Boston College.
Great
so I
point.
feel like that's just going to be such a magnificent moment for him. It's going to feel like any other day in some ways, but it's going to obviously have the emotional weight in a number of other ways.
Right.
There's another team you and I have been high on, and they exceed your expectations, and they also surprise you, and then you also kind of look at them and say, I don't know what to expect with this team being BU. But you know what you can expect? Yep. You can expect the Hudson brothers to throw on a cape and make it a day. Yep. First of all, the angles that Cole Hudson scores on, I just want to know what he scored on a trigonometry test. I want to just sit with him for a second. I could have used him back in high school because trig was the only thing that really kind of gave me a run for my money. But it's insane to just see the caliber that him and his brother play with, and to think that they both had two crucial goals to get past Cornell that really pushed them along the ropes there. What did you make of BU and them making it to the Frozen Four? Like, we kind of had them circled as a team that could sneak in.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how everyone was feeling. But the games that they played were so weird, I guess. You know, I was covering baseball last week, and of course they were playing Ohio State, and I think we texted each other after the first period or after the game, and we're like, oh my God, what's going on? And all of a sudden, the last two periods, BU does what BU does, and they just found that extra gear. And then, the Cornell game was interesting. I really wasn't sure what was going to happen in this game, but, you know, they did it again. And you're right, the Hudson brothers, the way that they can connect, you almost think about that telepathic thing again. It's like, you talk, like, I've covered teams that have twins on them, and the twins kind of seem to think and move the same way. But when you have brothers, one's a forward, one's a defender, it's like, instead of that, you know, telepathic play, it's more like, okay, well, what can I do to pick up where you leave off? And I feel like that's how they really kind of complement each other. And thinking about how players can score at certain angles, Cole Eisenman stands out to me too, because I don't know how this kid does it, but he's got the puck, and then it's in the back of the net. And I don't know how he does it half the time, or how the heck, like, an angle like that would go in. I think I retweeted one of his goals because I just watched it, I think, on a replay on a TV in a restaurant. And I was at the gym. I was actually at the gym. And I went on Twitter. I'm like, I need to hear the commentary of this play, because this was insane. And then I was just, completely impressed by him, impressed by the young players on that team, the older players. I think, BU's coming together at the right time and finding a way to finish games and close them out strong. And it'll be interesting to see them go up against Penn State. That's going to be a really interesting game.
You're watching the Hockey Hub, and if you like what you hear, make sure to like and subscribe to the show. Hockey Hub can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever else podcasts are found. Hey, it was good to see you guys.
Likewise, Ab.
And you are?
Adam Pellerin. I'll be ringside tonight for the Capitals Bruins game. And you know what? I'll be here with you guys on the Hockey Hub, but with you guys at the rink. We're going to be traveling, going to Montreal, going to Buffalo, New Jersey, spending some quality time before the end of the season, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to it. Nobody else is. Yeah, I was going to say, don't all jump up at once. All right, anyway, good seeing you guys. I'll wrap things up for the Hockey Hub. For Brick and Judd, I'm Adam. See you next time.